Hello and welcome to SDN Tech Forum. So in our last video, we finished configuring Fabric. That means we have our Fabric built, Anycast gateways configured on the switch. Now it is the moment of truth. So basically now we are going to connect our clients to the Fabric and see if the micro and macro segmentations policies are actually working. Client can connect to the Fabric, connect to the network using .1x authentication. So we will be touching multiple things here for validation. But before we start, I highly recommend you at least go back and watching two videos on my channel, Lisp SDA control plane and DHCP in SDA Fabric. Please, if you haven't watched these two videos, stop this video, go back, uh, understand what is the concept around Lisp, how to check things, and same thing for DHCP in SDA Fabric, and then come back and watch, because the steps what we will take during validation, they'll make more sense if you know the underlying concept. All right, let's do some verification here. So this is our network, and as you can see, let's go to client. This is DNAC assurance dashboard health client. Within client, you can see I have only 3 clients, and they are mostly loopbacks of my network devices. Total 3, connected 3. Now what we will do, we will add few more clients and see what is the view in assurance, what is going on within identity service engine, and so on. All right, so these are my 2 hosts. As you can see, Windows 10 client, so I'm running a VMware hypervisor here, and on top of that we have 2 Windows machine. We call it client 1 and client 2. The thing to notice is their MAC address. So let me expand this. DCA4, the MAC address which ends in DCA4, that is one of our hosts. Another host is the MAC address which ends in CDBA. And as you can see, these 2 VMs, they are powered down, and that's why we don't see any entry or any indication of that on DNA Center, as well as let's go and confirm that on switch. So we can go to 2 of our access switch and just type in show access session summary, or just show access session. Here you can see I do not have anything which is DCA4 or 2272, which is 2 of my VM host. Let's validate the same here. Show access session. You see there is no host entries here. All right, before we connect that, let's spend a minute looking at the Lisp control plane. So show IP verf. I have 2 VRFs here. That is my macro segmentation strategy, corporate VNs, and the guest. Yeah, management is by default. So 1 gigabit Ethernet 0x0 is part of management, but that is a default VRF. We cannot change that. Our strategy is all the regular employees and vendors, they are part of corporate VN. Anyone who's not part of corporate VN or guest, they just connect to guest and have minimum set of privileges. You can check the same thing here. So both the edge switches, they have identical configuration, and that is the beauty of SDA. Once you finalize your design, you can scale pretty easily. That means it's become a kind of like a cookie cutter design. You can add a edge node very quickly and apply the same set of policies. So what we are interested to see here is our Lisp table. I'm just copying some command from my other screen. So we have this VRF. Let's see, show Lisp EID table, endpoint ID table, and we are interested in corporate VRF. Let's see what is the dynamic EID we have today. So nothing, no host or endpoint has reached out yet. So that's why nothing is populated. Let's look at the database as well. And we will come back and validate this again once our host join the network. Here you can see this is my Anycast gateway 172.16.19.91.1, and this is one another IP address, and this is we are getting from this is a IP phone which is actually doing a MAB authentication here. So that's how we get this IP address. But this is our database, and as we start adding more hosts, we will see the database entries are getting populated. One thing also you need to check for control plane, which comes handy, what is your RLock. So you can see my RLock or locator default set ends in 7F, 9F. And this is another RLock which is unique to this edge switch. So that's my RLock. Okay. Now let's go ahead and power up to VMs. Once we power up the VM, they will start reaching out to the switch, and then switch in turn will relay their authentication request to ICE, and within ICE it should hit some sort of policy set, and based on that it should get a result assigned. And we are interested in our SDA policy set. In authorization policy, I have a default policy which is permit access. You can do a default deny also, but I'll let my VMs get power on and try to authenticate with these rules. Since they don't match anything because we have not supplied credentials, they should match the default and get authenticated as MAB, wired MAB, right? So because we have this default policy and it's doing either .1x or MAB. So let's go ahead and power up. Let's power up one only, which is 2272. We can watch this thing at the same time. As soon as the interface comes up, it will try to reach out to one of the switch. And we should see that indication. So we will not log in and supply any credentials. We will just wait for this to get power on so that the interface on my switch comes up and get the authentication request. Here you go. You can see 2272 has failed the authentication, as you can see, and it is coming on 10 gigabit 102. So that is the interface where this VM is connected. So at this session, trying to do authentication, and as you can see, it has got a MAB authentication with this in this domain. We can see the details, show authentications now, so we know the address, interface name. So authentication session interface T102 detail. As you can see, .1x failed and then MAB authentication success, and it should receive an IP address. All right, let's go to live logs and see what is going on. Operation radius live log. You can see here as well. 2272 came. It hit the authentication policy, and within authentication policy, we are hitting authorization policy, which is permit access. That's it. So you can expand that and see what's going on. This is my switch, sending it to relaying it to the radius server, and at the same time we can look at radius what's going on. So this is our DSCP server. I'm sorry, this is our DSCP server. See what kind of request it is getting from 2272. So I have my IP phones which is trying to reach out, yes, and all those things. So right now it has not requested any IP address 2272. Okay, so what we will do next, now we will log into the device itself and try to assign a username and password. .1x authentication. Yep, this is a VM, so please be patient. Sometime the latency is an issue. This is definitely latency. So let me pause the video here. And once I log in, I'm going to supply the credentials, which of course I'll show you, and we'll see what is the SGT this host is getting, what is the VN it will be assigned, and what policy it is hitting. So we will do a proper validation for our macro and micro. But you get the idea what we are doing, and I'll be back in a moment. We got our prompt back, and now I'm inside the VM. Let me close this. So to apply .1x authentication, what you have to do, you have to, based on what kind of system you have, this is for example Windows, we'll go to setting network and internet. We are looking into wired connection, so let's look at Ethernet. Unidentified network limited access, so let's go ahead and change adapter option. You can see I have a couple of adapters, Ethernet 0 which is connected, two are disconnected, and we will have our Wi-Fi validation once we build WLC. But for now, let's focus on wired. For Ethernet, click on Ethernet, the connected Ethernet, right click, properties. Within properties, you can see networking and sharing. What I am missing here is authentication or .1x tab. That means that service is not running. So let's go ahead and enable that service. And for that, what you can do, you can just type services.msc or service, excuse me, and find something called wired. Something called wired, W-I-R, wired auto config. Nope, that's license manager. Sorry about that. I think I found that, but then I missed. Yes, why? Okay, so this is some kind of lag on my system. Let me go slow. Yes, the wired auto config service is responsible for performing IEEE 802.1x authentication on Ethernet interface. This is what we want to start. So let's click on start. And now, so it started. Let's go back and visit our network Ethernet properties. Now you see we have an additional tab available called authentication. Within authentication, we are going to go and supply the credentials because we are relying on PSK. Setting, PEEP looks good, and I don't want to verify identity certificate. MSCHAP, Is my Windows login name? No, don't do that. Okay, go back, additional settings. Here you can see 802.1x settings. So SPI authentication mode. This is what we want, user authentication. We don't want any computer, you can have user and machine authentication together, but for simplicity, we will just stick to user authentication and hit on replace credentials. Now, this is the username and password I have to supply. If you're a corporate, obviously you will have uh, uh, LDAP or AD, and you can do certificate-based authentication. For our lab purposes, we have internal user created, and let me refresh your memory one more time. We go to actually my memory. I'm going to go to identities and look at the users. So we have Andy as a user, which is part of architect user group. So let's go back and apply Andy. So I'm going to say should not matter the caps, but okay. So as I apply before I hit OK, let's look at authentication session one more time. All right, as you can see, date has changed, shirt has changed. That means I have taken a break in between. So we powered on our end host, and now as you can see on switch, if you do show access session, I have my end host 2272 authenticated as .1x. So there is some issues with my DHCP server and etc. And we will talk about that in a moment. Let's take a look at the details first. So there are two ways you can check this. Either you can do show access session, or you can do simple show authentication session interface. As we know that this is T10 gig 102 details. So you can see this is my server policy. Method is .1x authentication success. VLAN is 1022 and SGT value is assigned, that is 19. We can have the similar logs coming in our ICE as well. So if you go to ICE, also in assurance, we should see this client. If you go to assurance, health, client, we should see that 2272 is logged in as AND, and device type is profiled as Microsoft type. Edge is 1 because it has not got the DHCP. So let's go and check. All right. So we will try to get the IPv4 address here in a moment. And we will watch that log from our DHCP server. So let's log into my DHCP. As you can see, there are multiple places where we have to go and verify, because we want to verify things from all the angles. Say 20, and we want to watch the logs. Okay. All right, so only 91 is coming up. So let's go ahead and toggle. So this is our client 1. As you can see, network adapter, that is 2272. So let's log in to this machine. And one more time, we just flap the NIC card by enable or disable. Okay, my ICE is here, and let's get the ICE prompt ready so that we can watch the logs. All right, I'm gonna go to operation. As you can see, Andy, and it has got an IP address before and now. So if you see this, there was a moment in time when Andy, it has got the IP address also and the SGT of IP address from this subnet. But let's go ahead and recreate that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just flap this interface by doing a disable, enable. As you can see, this is the real-time log coming up. Same thing we can tackle from DHCP. As you can see, DHCP discover message coming from 2272. It got an offer of 93.10, DHCP request and DHCP acknowledgement. So the complete DORA process. We can verify it from switch also. If you go to the switch, this time around, we should see the IP address available here, and it is logged in as Andy, having parked into the right VLAN and SGD values. All right, we will bring up our second client at the same time. So let's go to more VM behind the scene. Let's power on the second VM and look at the IP address or MAC address of this. Sorry, do not have much real estate here in the screen. So DCA4, that's our second end host. Let's go ahead and power it up, and we will enable .1x authentication and do the same thing what we did with client 1. All right, meanwhile, I would like to talk about the issues what we hit. So as you can see, this is the screenshot. Right now we are doing a .1x authentication successfully, but before that I was getting this error. 5400 authentication failed and username was not Andy but just the username. Going into detail, I got this failure reason. Client didn't provide suitable cipher. Check that supplicant and ICE have intersection of configured cipher list. So my Windows client is sending, since it's a lab machine, test machine, it is sending weak cipher suites. However, ICE has all the modern ciphers. So there is no intersection or there is no common cipher available between two. And because of that, I'm getting this 5400 authentication failed. To fix that, what you can do, you can go to ICE result authentication allowed protocol. Within allowed protocol, you will see we are doing all kind of like EAP TLS authentication. However, you have to check this box, allow weak cipher for EAP. Once you do that, we can get past of this problem, and then the required authentication process will go through. Right, so that was one of the issue. Now let's talk about what we are trying to validate. So so far, this is how our policy looks like. So we have three groups: architect, developer, and executives. Our policies are based on that: wired wireless architect, wired wireless developer, and so forth, executives or manager. They are part of these VLANs. So right now, as you can see, Andy has got an IP address from this VLAN 172.16.93.10, and we are bringing up another machine, and we will make it either one of it. All right, and these are the SGTs. So this is macro segmentation part. That means anyone who's part of corporate VN, they can talk to each other, unless you have micro segmentation in effect, that is via SGTs, right? So let's look at our policy. As you can see, we have one architect already in place. So architect cannot talk to managers, right? So this row is architect. Um, Architect can talk to architect, developers, guest, mainframe, PCI, managers, but not PCI server. Developers, they cannot talk to managers and they cannot talk to PCI servers. So we have an architect. We would like to simulate a policy which can help us demonstrate micro segmentation. So what we can do, we can have a manager. Let's say we can create a manager and then we will go ahead and change the policies. All right, this is some show commands from the switch. So as you can see, show CTS environment data, and you will see all your SGTs here. So like architect is 19, managers are 18, and so on. Show access session brief. This is a very useful command with some nice flags. It will tell you what's going into this session. Also, show authentication session interface details. This one we already saw this. It is very useful command. You will get the everything about your access session. That means username, MAC address, IP address, VLAN, authentication type, everything you will get it here. One very nice command I like is show access session stats. Within stats, you'll get multiple types of stat, but what is very useful is watching the latency. So how much time did it take to complete the authentication and authorization process? You can see, watch the latency from switch itself. You can do the same thing from ICE, of course, but from switch also you can measure latency. So that's really cool. All right, so let's go ahead and check our second machine. So client 2 is powered up. Let's open the console. And now we are going to just repeat the process. That means we will enable .1x authentication on the NIC and validate it with one of the user. So this part is repetitive. Please bear with me. Ethernet, change adapter setting. Ethernet 0. Right click, properties, no authentication. So let's go ahead and enable it by going to services, component services. All right, local services. Look for wired auto-config. It says .1x. This is our service. Let's go ahead and start this. Come back to say, okay, let's do one more time. Properties, authentication is here. We want to do chap, configure, additional settings, user authentication, replace credentials, and let's validate it as part of manager. So Mike is a user from the manager group. Okay, and now let it authenticate. We can watch If mic is coming in eyes, as you can see, it was a first VMware device, then it got profiled as Microsoft device, and now you can see Edge 3, where mic is connected, it is getting CTS request immediately, because ICE is actually if switch is actually pulling the SGT policy, CTS based policies. So let's look at it all four one at a time. And before we do that, let's select it as never. Let's go back and see if we are getting the policy here. Okay, it is in interface 1024. Show authentication session interface T24 details. As you can see, it is part of VLAN 1023 and SGT value 18. Did we get IP address? Yes, we did get the IP address 172.16.92.18. And if you want to see where my architect belongs, where my manager belong, in which VLAN, this is the snapshot we should be looking at. Andy, which is now 93.10, Mike, which is now 92. I believe 92.18. All right. So both of them has got the IP address. Let's look at the ICE flow. So the very first one, the very first time when Mike came, authentication was success. It was hitting the right policy, but look at the endpoint profile. It was still a VMware device. And policy and authorization results, they were all good. Okay. It was still a 802.1x authentication, right VLAN, right tag, security group tag is correct. Okay. Now let's look what happened when the reprofiling happened here. Now you will see still user identity manage identity group, and now you can see it is profile. It does say profile. That means it identified the operating systems and other characteristics. Authentication passed. Okay. Very cool. And now finally, let's check the CTS. This is TrustSec data download succeeded, as you can see. So service type is outbound, network device H3. This is the network device requesting the CTS data. And you can see it has downloaded RBAC source ACL 12. That is hexadecimal value actually. That's why it says 12, but actual SGT is 18. So this is a hexadecimal value. Okay. Final, one more CTS request. Let's see what is we have. It's kind of like repeating the same thing. 5233, 5233. TrustSec download. And in this time, you can see it is deny IP and deny IP implicit one. So TrustSec data was downloaded, IP address assigned, onboarding happened. For our satisfaction, let's try to do the final verification, which is going to the device itself and say CMD. As you can see, it is 92.18. We are going to ping Andy. So we are at Mike. We are going to ping Andy because there is no policy which is restricting communication between them. As you can see, communication is going on. So my users connected, they got their policies, and they can talk to each other. CTS verification, one nice command. I can show you. Show CTS role-based permissions. And from here, you can do from, like which SGT to what SGT, or you can just say so CTS role-based permission. As you can see, this is my permissions here, because right now I have permit everything up IP, any. Okay. And also you can see IPv4 role-based access permission from developer to managers, which is deny IP. So manager cannot talk to developer on IPv4. They can talk to them on certain protocols only. So I think this is already increasing our length of our video. So I'm not going to continue and more validation, but I hope you got the idea. And this concludes our SD Access Bootcamp, base Bootcamp. We will be continue to do some more like wireless stuff and what's new with DNAC 2335. But this concludes our SD Access Bootcamp. So thank you very much for staying with me. Congratulations. I hope you now it is easy for you to break down the complex technology and work with this. And if the series helped you in your work or increase your job knowledge, please do let me know in the comment section. Like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And thank you for watching.